Hello everyone. In today's video we're going to be finishing up our little series on flying this neat aircraft. This is the Wilga 35P. And we're going to take a look at some navigation as well as some power setting stuff. So first things first, we've gotten ourselves up in the air here. It's time to reduce our power into something a little bit better. We're going to come down to what they call the maximum continuous rating. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and reduce our manifold pressure to 8, which we have. We're going to reduce our RPM to get up into the 2050 range, which is going to be right around there. So this is our max continuous setting for this particular aircraft. Theoretically, we could fly around like this all afternoon if we wanted to. The downside of this, of course, is you're going to burn a ton of fuel. And one of the downsides to these old Rumblade radials is they're not the most fuel-efficient engines, especially when you get larger size. I've actually been consistently surprised how fast this thing will pound fuel. But the thing you're probably noticing is that we're about 150 kilometers an hour. We're still climbing pretty quick, about 6 meters per second, and we're just going up, 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 up. No problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to climb up to 1,000 meters, which you can see we got about 100 meters to go, which isn't too bad. Like I said, very, very quick climb rate on this particular aircraft. And given that we're not dragging a glider and we're about half weight right now, it makes it much, much, much simpler to go ahead and get this thing up. All right, that looks like about 1,000 meters right there. I'm going to go push the nose down. It's going to take just a minute for all the instruments to catch up on us, as you're going to see here. There we go. Nice and easy. This aircraft will not travel straight, by the way. One thing you notice is that the controller is at kind of a funky angle there. That helps facilitate the trim situation you're going to be starting to face. So now that we're kind of at a correct altitude, just taking one quick look at all the gauges, looks good, looks good, we can now drop down to the normal cruise setting. The normal cruise setting, first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull our throttle back to get to 6, and it's going to be about 6 right there. Actually 600, but that's okay. Nobody needs to know that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to reduce the RPM so we're at the top of the green arc there, or the bottom of the green arc, I should say. Go ahead and catch my altitude as it starts to rip away from me. And that's it. That's my cruise settings. Normally, as we're cruising around, there's a bunch of different things we want to be concerned about. We want to be worrying about things like our current temperature. We want to be worried about things like switching fuel tanks when we're kind of cruising around. Now, some of you are probably like, what about that cool autopilot? Yeah, we're going to do the autopilot in a second. My favorite part of the autopilot on this aircraft is not so much that it's going to fly you to your destination. It's just that it makes it easier to go ahead and point it where you want to go. So I'm going to come over here, reach over with my controls. I'm going to go ahead and click on the flight director here. The whole aircraft will pitch, and then what I'm going to do is you're actually going to fly the aircraft with the autopilot. So what we can do now is we can set our pitch reference. If I press this, you'll notice the nose comes down. Theoretically, you can put this down to 0 degrees, and it should theoretically level you off. Again, it's not going to be perfect. The other item you have here, if you take a look at the autopilot, is you've got this kind of left-right mode. If I set this to 0, the aircraft will be flying as straight and level as it can actually level, but not necessarily not up and down. That's different. This is good news for us because it gives us plenty of time to go ahead and double check everything. So what do I see here? I see that my oil temperature is perfect, and I can also see that my cylinder temperature is also perfect. If I actually go around the front here, you can see my shutters are opened completely right now, and that's just kind of the nature of the beast that is this aircraft. It just likes to do that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to float over to my handy-dandy unit. This is my ADF. Now we're going to be dialing into a local ADF here. So I'm going to press clear, 375. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go and see exactly what we can pick up here. So give it just a few moments here. Let's see, did I need to do 0375? I'm just taking a look to make sure I didn't miss anything. One of the downsides to the ADF and NDB modeling in Flight Sim is a lot of times what will happen is even though you have an appropriate signal, you might not be able to pick it up because it's like in a different set of nav data and things like that. Just kind of one of those bummer things here. That's kind of exciting because I kind of need that frequency. One moment, please. And had I waited exactly 5 more seconds, I would have seen that the needle worked perfectly. You got to make sure you're in range of an ADF. So the way this works is pretty straightforward. I have a little NDB station way off in the distance here at an Asia airport, and I can see this little yellow needle that just appeared is now telling me what direction I need to turn the aircraft in order to get to that particular position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to my AP turn here. I'm going to dial in a nice solid 3-degree turn, and you're going to see the aircraft tip, and you're going to see that needle start to come back towards the center. I'm going to go ahead and level ourselves out here real quick. You can see we can come just a tiny bit more over, and again, I'm flying the plane with the autopilot here. So now that ADF needle is completely centered, meaning I am now pointing directly at the actual place that this particular border, this signal, this NDB I should say, is appearing. So this little ADF thing is pretty much your primary instrument for the purposes of navigating using instruments. Unfortunately, for those of you who are flying in the United States, you're not going to find a lot of NDB stations left. So you're going to be kind of at the mercy of flying in locations that have them, or basically creating artificial ones. Now, it's worth noting that some of the other versions of the Wilga that came with this package did have a GPS on it, and one of them actually had a VOR too, so you could use that one as well. So I'm going to go ahead and take a couple taps to the left here, and we're going to kind of zoom in here. Now, off in the distance here, you probably noticed this very large runway. This is our ultimate destination here. This is going to be, this is OKECIE. This is Echo Papa Whiskey Alpha. And what I'm doing right now is actually lining myself not for the runway that you see right here, but for this runway here. And the actual NDB station that's sending us all these lovely signals to line us up is actually located right there. Now, this is where things are going to start getting tricky with this aircraft. And that's going to be how you get the aircraft down without damaging the engine. So first things first, I'm going to go ahead and disengage the autopilot. I'm going to go ahead and give myself a couple taps of trim. And I'm going to go ahead and point myself down at about 3 meters per second. It's going to be a pretty good speed here. You can see 1, 2, that's about 250 meters a second. Come down, that'd be terrible. 2.5 meters a second, that would be a lot of meters per second. And one thing you're noticing here is I'm not touching my throttle. A lot of people are going to be reaching over for that throttle and pulling that throttle back. You can definitely use that to go ahead and slow yourself down. But one of the things I was warning you about earlier is when you start to descend, you start to pick up speed, your cooling will increase, and it actually could put your engine in danger of what they call shock cooling, especially if you're flying with realistic engines. One of the things you can do, of course, is you can actually close up the cowl shutters here and reduce power marginally. Again, you want to keep it inside that green arc. So right now I've got about, what does that work out to be? It's about 450 millimeters or so. That's pretty far back, but you can tell by the attitude of the aircraft that we're coming down pretty fast. Since I've reduced power, I'm creating less heat, but I'm also getting rid of a lot of heat, which is why we had to kind of crack those shutters. So if you look right now, the shutters are partially cracked closed. I definitely don't have them open all the way. And all we're doing now is basically continuing locking on that little NDB off in the distance, and we're slowly cooling things off. You probably also noticed just how incredibly fast this thing is going down right now. I'm getting about 4 meters per second, which is substantial. You would definitely be feeling that as you start to descend here. One thing I'm noticing out of the corner of my eye here, and I'm constantly keeping an eye on that, is my cylinder head temperature is coming up, which is good and bad. It's not exceeding the red region, but it also shows you how little you can crack that actual cowl flap and have such a massive instant impact in the temperature. As a matter of fact, that impact is so great, I'm actually going to have to open up the shutters some more here. There's a little bit too much there. I don't like the way that's trending. All right, you can see how right off the nose here, we're starting to slow down, go down, kind of a thing like that. Looks pretty good. Still pretty warm. Keep an eye on the oil temperature. Like I said, if you put it at 50%, you're probably fine. And we're just going to keep on down while keeping that ADF needle nice and centered. All right, that looks pretty good. We're coming down to, we've got about 400 meters. Keep on climbing down here. That's about 380. I'm getting pretty low. Keep in mind there's no radar altimeter on this. You're basically using the think system as far as what needs to get you safely down. But I'm seeing that I'm still slowly overheating, so I'm actually going to crack these things all the way back open again. So again, depending on how aggressively you descend and how much power you leave in it, it's going to have a big impact on how quickly this overheats or underheats, which would be pretty bad for us too. All right, 300 meters looks pretty good. So let's go get ourselves all lined up with that lovely runway. All right, there's a lovely runway. So we're going to start slowing down. Again, that cooling problem is still a cooling problem, by the way. The runway is right there. Somebody happened to put a piece of metal right in my line of sight. Not very safe. So landing this thing is relatively straightforward. One thing that makes it a little bit tricky is the approach speed. So if you take a look, our stall speed is just a tiny bit over 100 kilometers an hour. 100 kilometers per hour times 1.3 works out to be about 130 kilometers per hour, which is about a fair approach speed. You can definitely bring this thing a lot slower down to speed if you choose to do so. You just have to be very mindful that when you land, it's going to land with a bang as opposed to land with something smooth. A couple things we want to check for when we're coming in for landing here. We want to double check to make sure our fuel pump is on, which it is. We're going to double check to make sure we can actually flip on our landing light, which is this little switch right here. We're going to close up the cowl shutters a little bit because, again, we don't want to overheat things. Then we're going to start slowing down at the same time as increasing our RPM up to full. Now, the flaps on this thing are very effective. So I'm actually going to hold the nose up to get in the right arc. There's going to be flaps 2, flaps 3, and you can see this thing is ready for takeoff. And we are already below our recommended stall speed. If I actually let go of the controls right now, you'll see that this aircraft is having no difficulty remaining in control. If you actually look at the front of the wing, you'll see that it's got those very, 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 very fancy devices there in the front, that slat, which is basically giving us a ton of control at a very low speed. So I can easily fly this thing as low as this particular speed. I'm overheating. There we go. Even though I've reduced power substantially, that's how quick that happens. All right, I'm just going to hold us right at 100 kilometers per hour. It's about 60 knots. Oh, not much. This thing is very Cessna-like at these weights. And that's looking pretty good. So what makes this one tricky is if you're coming in at a speed this slow, you have to remember that if you cut the power, the aircraft will decide to stop flying on you. By the way, if you look at my bottom right, see how we're doing about 2 to 3 feet per meters per second. It's tricky for me. You know why. You can see it's just about that 500 feet per minute that you're so adapted to. All right, looking pretty good. It's very tempting right now to pull the throttle back, but I guarantee you the aircraft will stop flying on you. All right, looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come right down to the runway. We're going to continually fly this. Remember, we are a tail dragger, so there's the power out. I'm going to pull the nose up just a little bit. And you can see that thing stops flying as soon as you pull the power out. So if you reduce that, you are going to be feeling it. But look at how little distance I need to go ahead and slow this thing down. All right, we are safely on the ground. Once we're on the ground, it's just a matter of getting us all kind of cleaned up here. Usually one of the things we would do, of course, is close everybody up because you don't want to sit here and let that engine cool off any faster than it needs to. And you can see that the temperature's coming down. So this is a pretty neat aircraft. Like I said, it's quite a trip to fly this thing around. It's got some kind of fun little features. Actually, I'll show one of those features off real quickly here. I'm going to go sneak off into the grass before I do that because it's more cool to do that. As far as systems go, it's not bad. I'm amazed they use this as a trainer plane because I feel that the engine is a bit picky. And obviously, if you're dealing with somebody who does this every day, kind of it's not too bad. Shutdown procedure on this one is very, very, very similar. We're just going to go ahead and basically undo everything that we did here. One of the tricky things that we want to watch out for is we're shutting stuff off is not to hit the thing that's going to go ahead and cut everybody off. That's fine. That's fine. We don't need that. We don't need that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and rev up the engine. And we're going to pull back the mixture. And then as the engine revs, we're going to push the throttle forward. And we're good to go. Okay, so that looks pretty good. That's all set. We're coming up here, thwack. And of course, Windows is going to be like, you have to go do this. I'm like, no, I'm not done yet. One of the neat features, by the way, and this is just an aside, is if you go to that little clipboard that's down here, all right, go ahead and grab it real fast. You'll notice you have a bunch of fun buttons on here. We can turn the Copilot on. We can put the pitot cover on. We can also unload the cargo. We can hang a lantern, and we can go ahead and unpack a hammock. One of the things you'll see here is now I've got everything sitting here right by my little airplane. Got my hammock. This lantern, by the way, you can leave on here if you want to have a fun time and watch it bang around. But it also unloaded all my lovely cargo sitting here on the right. Enjoy.